Hey writer friends, Holly here. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for stopping by my channel and thank you for watching my very first video. So I've watched a lot of videos by different writers and authors and a lot of indie authors, and I've learned so much by watching their videos and getting their writing advice, and I've made a lot of friends too in the writing community. So I figured, why not be a part of this awesome community? So I'm a writer myself, and now I'm a newbie author tuber. So I wanted to start off with this first video to share my top 5 editing tips for any writer. So I actually finished editing the final draft, hopefully the final draft of my first novel, Ranakori Realm, back in June, and I learned a lot about the editing process from editing Ranakori Realm. The final draft is actually the 5th draft of this novel, so I've been through a lot of ups and downs of learning what it takes to make your novel the best it can be. So I thought I'd share with you my 5 editing tips, so let's get right into the video. Tip number 1, print your manuscript out. Once you finish that bad boy, it's time to tear it apart. Don't worry, your first draft is gonna be crappy. Everyone's is. That's why it's a draft. You're going to have to go through multiple revisions, and that's normal. But printing out your first draft helps to look at your novel in a different way instead of on the computer. Most people don't handwrite their novels anymore. They type it on the computer. So sometimes looking at the screen is different than seeing it on paper and reading it as if it were a book. So printing out your manuscript is helpful not only to look at your novel with fresh eyes, but also so that you can write down and mark up that novel with the specific revisions that you want to do. Usually I tackle the biggest changes that I need to make first, any changes to the plot, character arcs, any plot holes that I found along the way, and then you want to write those down and maybe mark up each chapter with post-it notes of those changes that you want to make. I also like to just scour through the whole manuscript, not like nitty-gritty, line by line, but just kind of overall general feel of the novel, whether I'm like, this paragraph sounds confusing, fix it. And then I'll go back to the main document once I finish going through the whole printed out manuscript, and then I'll make all those changes that I implemented. So I don't usually look at and make all the changes on the actual document, but I'll just mark up, okay, this needs to be fixed, or clarify this or change this, and then I go onto the computer and I make all those changes. Tip number 2, read your manuscript out loud. I was amazed by how many times I was reading my novel out loud and I was just cringing at how awkward and weird it sounded. Sometimes we think that dialogue sounds good when we're writing it out, but then when you read it out loud, it totally doesn't make sense, and you realize people don't really talk like this in real life. So reading through your manuscript helps you figure those things out. Another thing that helps with reading your manuscript out loud is finding those awkward phrases or phrases that you repeat over and over again. Sometimes I'd read the beginning of a chapter and I'd use a phrase, and then halfway down the page I'd use it again, and then 2 pages later I use it again, and I'm like, what is going on here? I didn't catch it when I was reading it, but when I was reading it out loud, I was able to see it. I was able to find those changes. Plus, it's fun to act out your characters out loud, especially if they have a funny accent, or during a scene of playful banter, or when someone's making a joke. There's so many times where I'm just laughing out loud, or I'm just having so much fun because I'm acting out these different characters like it's a movie. Tip number 3, use editing apps like Grammarly or the Hemingway Editor app. Grammarly is a free app that you can download straight to your computer that you can use to work its magic on your Word document. I like using Grammarly because it catches some of the grammar mistakes that Microsoft Word doesn't pop up for me. I also like it because even when I was working on the 4th draft of Ranakori Realm, I still caught grammar mistakes. And the reason why is because as you're going through those multiple revisions, sometimes you're writing completely new scenes, or you're changing up dialogue and rewriting lines. And so you may be writing new grammar mistakes. So I recommend every draft using the Grammarly app. Because the app can take a while to scan a whole document, I recommend cutting and pasting each chapter of your manuscript into a new document. That way it won't take forever to scan the whole manuscript, especially if you have over 100K Word document, because that would take a long time and it's pretty much impossible. The second app, the Hemingway Editor app, is another app that you can download straight to your computer, but I like cutting and pasting each chapter into the website version. This app has been invaluable to me. It takes note of your adverb count and your use of passive voice. Other things that it does is it highlights sentences that are hard to read and also very hard to read. They'll highlight the hard to read in yellow and the very hard to read in red. Lastly, it highlights phrases that have simpler alternatives. With everything that the Hemingway Editor app does, it's always going to catch things that you will not find just by reading through it. As a fantasy writer, this app can be frustrating at times because it highlights all of the made-up words and original names that I've come up with in my story. For example, it kept marking one of my characters' names, Millie, as an adverb because it ends in ly. So I just took note of that any time that my adverb count was really high. I just deducted the amount of times her name showed up and I was in the clear. So take note of that when you're using this app. Tip number 4, get feedback from beta readers and critique partners. You can't edit your book alone. You need people that haven't seen your work before, that don't know your story, and you need a new set of eyes on your manuscript. My beta readers and critique partners have helped me work out any kinks in my plot, helped me reword any confusing phrases or awkward sentences, and have just made my novel better. Last year, I thought my novel's third draft was amazing and so good and totally ready to query to literary agents. But I sent my manuscript out to 2 new critique partners, and they both gave me the same advice, that I needed more foreshadowing of a critical piece of background information for my main character. I thought it was totally obvious. I was trying to keep it a secret for as long as I could and then reveal it at the end. But for them, they told me that they felt blindsided by it. And I wouldn't have known that because I totally knew all along what was going to happen, but they didn't. So I reworked that into the plot and kind of added in more foreshadowing, and I wouldn't have known that if they didn't give me that advice. And finally, tip number 5, go through your manuscript line by line. Line by lines can be one of the most daunting tasks of the editing process, but it's also been one of the most helpful things that I've ever done. Line by lines are just that, going through your manuscript line by line, finding any unnecessary words you can cut to tighten up on your word count, or removing any flowery prose that just drags on and on. This is the most time-consuming part of the editing process, but it has also been the most helpful, helping me go from an okay third draft to a query-ready final draft. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you found these tips helpful and can use them no matter where you are in your writing journey. If you like what you saw, please consider subscribing to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment below. Let me know what your favorite editing tips are. Until next time, bye!